Welcome and thank you for standing by. Currently, all participants are in a listen-only mode. Today's webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be posted publicly. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. Now I'd like to turn the call over to your host for today, Faith Whittington.
Thank you, Lisa. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar event. We appreciate you joining us today for this webinar on accessing 2020 detailed demographic and housing characteristics file B data on data.census.gov. My name is Faith Whittington, and I am your host for today's event. Today, our presenter will provide information on the data available from the 2020 detailed DHCB and how to access it on data.census.gov. I want to thank my Census Bureau colleagues for joining me and helping me to support our speaker today and for making this webinar possible. I will be handing things off to our presenter in just a few moments, but first, want to go over some housekeeping items. Today, we will have a panel of experts available to answer your questions via the Q&A panel. We'd like to encourage participants to use the Q&A panel in WebEx to submit questions throughout the presentation. To submit questions, make sure to use the All Panelists option from the drop-down menu. I will be using the chat panel to send you all helpful information, including instructions, site links, and contact information. So again, for questions, please use the Q&A panel and make sure to use the All Panelists options to submit. And use the chat panel to find links and helpful information. At the end of the webinar, we will take your questions through the WebEx audio line. For this portion, we will ask participants to use the raised hand icon in WebEx to indicate if you have a question. You will be allowed to come off of mute to ask your question. Just remember, when we call your name, please unmute yourself. A quick note, the Q&A session will focus on the platform data.census.gov. We will not be able to go over in-depth questions on the 2020 census products, the data collection process, disclosure avoidance, or methodology. As always, we are recording the webinar today, and all the materials for this training will be available through the Census Academy website. Thank you again for joining us. Now I will introduce our presenter, Sam Patton. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you so much, Faith, and thank you everyone for joining our webinar today, where we are going to be accessing 2020 detailed demographic and housing characteristics file B data on data.census.gov. My name is Sam Patton. I am a program analyst with the U.S. Census Bureau, so very happy to have you all join us here today, and I'm going to go ahead and get started. So today we are going to be looking at accessing 2020 Census Detailed Demographic and Housing Characteristics File B data, and that's quite a long name. So for the remainder of the webinar, I will just be referring to that as the Detailed DHCB. The Detailed DHCB was released last Thursday on August 1st, 2024, and it obtains household data on approximately 1,500 detailed groups, which includes detailed racial and ethnic groups such as German, Lebanese, Jamaican, Chinese, Native Hawaiian, Mexican, and others, as well as detailed American Indian and Alaskan Native tribes and villages such as the Navajo Nation, the Native village of Fort Yukon, as well as others. When we're looking at accessing data from the detailed DHCB, this is going to be data about households, and there are two primary subjects we're going to be looking at from the data over on data.census.gov. The first being for household type, which includes family and non-family households, and then tenure, which is whether or not the home is owned or rented. And the detail that you receive back for these household type and tenure tables is going to depend on the total population of the group and the geographic level that you're looking at. So we'll talk more about what exactly that means in just a bit with some different charts that we can look at and identify the different levels of detail we're going to get back based on these different household type and tenure tables. The geography that's available from the detailed DHCB includes the nation, states, counties, census tracts, places, which include geographies like cities and towns, and then American Indian, Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiian areas. A moment ago, I mentioned how the level of detail depends on the total population of the group and geographic level that you're looking at. So I have a chart here that will help you identify what detailed DHCP tables you're going to receive back based on the geographic level and the detailed DHCA total population count you're receiving. So whether you're looking at the nation state, the substate, or AI, AN, and H level, you're able to see based on that detailed DHCA population, we're going to receive back 2 tables total. So there are a total of 4 household type tables and 2 tenure tables. So although there are 6 tables total that you might receive back that you might see on the site, only 2 of those tables are going to have data. So my point with showing you this is not to have you memorize this or anything like that. It's just to give you a better idea of why you're going to receive some tables back at a more detailed level than others. And a short way to think of this is that larger groups are going to receive more household type and tenure information, while smaller groups are going to receive less. So we're going to come back to this chart a few times throughout the webinar and reference it with our different examples. When we're looking at finding race and ethnicity data over on data.census.gov, we're going to be using our advanced search function. So when we go to our advanced search function under topics, we'll see a topic filter for race and ethnicity. We will click words with chevrons to get more options to choose from there. So for the example here, I navigated to that race and ethnicity topic, then down to the Polynesian alone filter. And then within that, we get different checkboxes to make our final search selection. So to give an outline of how the webinar is going to go today, the majority of the time is going to be spent on data.census.gov, doing a live demonstration and looking at examples for detailed DHCP data. Following our live demonstration, we'll have some resources for ways you can learn more about the detailed DHCP as well as data.census.gov, and then we'll close out with some questions from you all. So let's get started with our data.census.gov demonstration. So we're going to cover a couple different topics for looking at data from the detailed DHCP. And the first one I want to focus on is finding detailed DHCP tables for the Burmese alone population in the United States. So let's keep this example in mind, the Burmese alone population for the United States, and then navigate over to data.census.gov to get started. So I'm just here in my web browser. I'm using Google Chrome. I went over to data.census.gov, and this is the home page here. So as I mentioned a moment ago, we are going to be using this advanced search feature for most of the examples we're going to be looking through today. So right below the search bar here, we have a help button that will take you to our resources page, a feedback button that leads you to our feedback email, and then that advanced search option where we are going to be spending most of our time throughout these examples. So I'm going to go on over to the advanced search option. And once it loads up here, we have kind of a blank slate to start loading up filters to do our search that we're looking for here. So on the left side of our screen is where we're going to start adding in our different filters. So as we scroll down on our filters here, what I'm actually going to start with is under years. I'm going to have a checkbox here where I'm going to select 2020. So that's going to be the first filter I'm going to select for each of these. And then I'm also under surveys going to go to decennial census and select detailed demographic and housing characteristics file B. And you'll notice one of the reasons I first selected 2020 as my filter here is it clears up a lot of the other surveys that I'm not interested in looking at. So first, I know I'm looking for 2020 census data, correct? So I selected that 2020 filter and it cleared up a lot of the extraneous filters from 2010 and the 2000 decennial census. And then when I click into the detailed DHCP filter, that's going to clean things up as well for me here and allow me to just select from a couple different topics available within the detailed DHCP. So just scrolling back up to confirm what we've selected so far, we've got our 2020 filter, We've got our detailed DHCB filter selected. Now I want to add in that filter for the Burmese alone population. So under topics, we're going to go into that race and ethnicity filter here. We are looking for the Burmese alone population, so that's going to be within Asian. Then we have this option for detailed Asian alone or detailed Asian alone or in any combination. We are looking for the Burmese alone population in this case, just to give some background on what the difference between these two. In our example, the Burmese alone would represent the minimum number of people who identified as that group. So it would include only people who reported only one response, such as only Burmese. Whereas this race alone or in any combination filter would represent the maximum number of people who identified as that group. So it would include those who reported only one response, such as Burmese, and those who reported multiple responses, such as Burmese and Malaysian, just as an example. So we'll look at some alone or in any combination filters in a bit here, but we're going to start just by looking at this detailed Asian alone. Then Burmese alone is going to be found within Southeast Asian alone. And here's the checkbox for that Burmese alone filter. So we have our 3 filters selected here. Our geography we were looking for was the United States. And there is an option to select United States as a filter here. However, for most tables, when you don't select a filter, it will default to the United States. It's not the case for all tables, but I know for the detailed DHCB here, without selecting any geography filter, and if I just do a search, it's going to default to that United States geography. So I'll just leave my filters as they are here, and then down in the bottom right corner is the search option here. So when I click on that, I get 6 tables back here. And remember from the slide that I showed earlier, although we're receiving 6 tables back here, only 2 of them are going to have data within them. So when I click into the first table here, this T03001 table, I get this data not available message. So what that means to me, I know within these tables, there are going to be 2 that have data. So I'm just going to keep navigating through them from the household type table to the household type table with 2 categories, still receiving that data not available message, into the 6 category table, still receiving that message. It's only when I navigate over to T03004, the household type table with 8 categories, that I receive data back here. So when we're looking at this table, we can see first here, we are looking at tables. These tables are showing households where the householder is Burmese alone in the United States. So I don't want anybody to get confused when they see this to think this is a population number. This is showing the total number of households here again, where the householder is Burmese alone. And then underneath that, we have household data here. And this is where we have our 8 categories, or you can think of it as 8 rows of data within the table, where we have family households within, as well as married couple families. And then under other family, we have male and female householders with no spouse present. Then finally, under non-family, we have householder living alone, as well as householder not living alone. So these are the data, the most detailed data we have for the 8 categories of data available here from household type. Then under tenure, whether or not a home is owned or rented, we have these 2 tables available here. So within our first tenure table, we're getting that data not available message, but when we go over to our 3 category tenure table, we do see again the total number of occupied housing units here in this case, and then 3 categories of data within this tenure table here. So when we're thinking about this first example, and we have again these 4 household type tables and then the 2 tenure tables that appear here, I wanted to reference back to that slide that we talked about a moment ago. And so when we're looking at why those 2 tables are appearing here, again, let's refer back to this chart here. So what I looked up here, I looked up the Burmese alone population in the United States as of the detailed DHCA. And I saw that the Burmese alone population in the US was 258,595, which when looking at this chart here, at the nation level, we can see it exceeds 6,971 people. And so because of that, that's why we're receiving back the most detailed data here, the 8 categories of household type data, and then the 3 categories of tenure data. So it's based on the detailed DHCA total population count here is when we're receiving back these detailed DHCB tables that we're looking at. For the next example, I'm going to look at detailed DHCB tables for the Shoshone-Bannock tribes of the Fort Hall Reservation alone or in any combination population in 3 different geographies. And as I look through these different geographies, we'll see as the group size gets smaller between these geographies, we will see different tables appear based on the geography we're looking at. So let's start with the Shoshone-Bannock tribes alone or in any combination in the United States, where the population is going to be the largest, as well as the total number of households. So looking for the Shoshone-Bannock tribes alone or in any combination in the US, I'm going to navigate back to data.census.gov here. And to just start a fresh search and clear out all of these filters here, I can just click in the top left corner of my screen here on the US Census Bureau logo, and that'll take me back to the home page. And then from there, I can navigate back to advanced search, and that kind of just clears everything out for me and I can start fresh. So again, though, I am going to select 2020 as my year filter. And I'm going to select decennial census, detailed DHCB here as my survey filter. And then for our topics within race and ethnicity, this time we are going to go into American Indian and Alaska Native. We're going to go into detailed American Indian and Alaska Native alone or in any combination. Once more into American Indian alone or in any combination. And then from here, we have a list of filters to choose from. And there's quite a few to look through here. So rather than scroll down and try to find Shoshone-Bannock, I'll just use the search bar up top and type in Shoshone-Bannock, and that saves me a little bit of time rather than having to scroll through the full list there. I'll go ahead and check the box here for the Shoshone-Bannock tribes. Confirming my filters, we have 2020, the detailed DHCB, and then the Shoshone-Bannock tribes alone or in any combination filter. From here, I can go ahead and select search in the bottom right corner of my screen. And then as I go into the tables here, I can start looking through and see where my data is available. So again, I'm receiving a couple data not available messages here for the 2 categories, household type data, and then as well, once we get over to the 6 categories table though, we are able to receive data back here. So again, we are looking at tables that are looking at households where the householder is Shoshone-Bannock alone or in any combination in the United States. So I can see those total number of households here. And then we have 6 categories of data here. So again, we have our family households, married couple and other family, as well as non-family households with householder living alone and householder not living alone. For our tenure tables, we can see this T04001 table. We're receiving that data not available message. But when we get over to the 3 categories table here, again, we are able to see data on whether or not our home is owned or rented. So again, keeping in mind with the total number of households we're looking at here, we can imagine that the population size is probably a bit smaller as well for these. And so we can reference back again to that chart we were looking at before, this time looking at the Shoshone-Bannock tribes alone or in any combination population in the United States. I could see as of the detailed DHCA, it was 5,900, which falls into this population threshold here at the nation level, which is why we're just receiving back that household type with 6 categories and then the tenure table with 3 categories. For our next example, we will drill down to a smaller geography here, still looking at the Shoshone-Bannock tribes alone or in any combination. This time, though, we are going to look at the Fort Hall Reservation and off-reservation trust land in Idaho. So with that geography in mind, let's go back over to data.census.gov and add it in. This time I will leave my filters here because I'm still looking for the Shoshone-Bannock tribes alone or in any combination. So I'll leave that filter here. I just want to add in the geography I'm looking for. So I was looking for an American Indian area. So under geographies, I don't see it in the top list of geographies here. That's because it's going to be found under all geographies here. And when you click into all geographies, there's quite a few that show up. And you can see we can scroll down and see quite a few geographies that show up. And there's even quite a few American Indian areas that show up here. Now I know that this is the geography I need to select, but for new users, I think it can be a little bit tricky knowing which of these you have to know to go to. So a quick tip to help you remove geographies that aren't relevant to your filters is if we go up to the top here, by default, we're selecting this geographic entities, but if we click on over to summary level here, it's only going to show me the geographies available based on my filters that I applied here. So these geographies, for anyone who remembers our geography slide earlier on, might look a bit familiar because all we're looking at here are the geographies available for the detailed DHCB. So for us, it's easy enough to here to see that we need to go to summary level 250, the American Indian, Alaska Native, and Hawaiian homelands here. So when I click into this filter here, from here, I was looking for Fort Hall Reservation. So I will just go ahead and type in Fort Hall in the search box here and check that box for the Fort Hall Reservation and off-reservation trust land. And when I do that, my tables were returned here, but I'm getting blocked by my filter that I applied here. So to remove that, I'm just going to click the X right here so I'm able to see my tables. So again, here this time we are still seeing the tenure table with 3 categories. We can see the total number of occupied housing units got a bit smaller than when we were looking at it for the United States. And similarly, for the household type table here, we can see the total number of households also getting a bit smaller. And this time with 2 categories, we're only able to see family and non-family households in this case. So when we're looking at this, again, we're seeing the total number of households here where the householder is Shoshone-Bannock alone or in any combination. So around 989 here for the total number of households. But if we go back again to our slide here where we can see why those 2 tables are appearing, I looked at the Shoshone-Bannock tribes alone or in any combination population for Fort Hall Reservation, Idaho. And we can see that as of the detailed DHCA, it was 2,854, which falls between this threshold here at the American Indian area level, which is why we're receiving back just that household type 2 categories table, and then still receiving the tenure table with 3 categories. And so for our last example here with the Shoshone-Bannock tribes, I want to look at the geography for Power County, Idaho. Power County is a county that covers a very small portion of the Fort Hall Reservation. So just knowing that, I can imagine that the total number of households is probably going to decrease quite a bit from looking at the United States or the Fort Hall Reservation. And I'll probably only get back the base tables when I do this search here. But let's take a look over at the site and see what data is returned. So back over here on the site, again, this time I'll keep my filters again. I just want to change my geography here. So my geography here is the Fort Hall Reservation and off-reservation trust land in Idaho. So I can remove that just by clicking the X here. So when I do that, we're actually defaulting back to the United States here at this point, which is why actually if we look at the table here, we're back to the United States here. But if we wanted to add in Power County, Idaho, I could go to county here. I'll go to Idaho. And then again, just using my search and search for Power County here and check the box. So once again, if I click that X to remove my county filter selection, I can see at this point, I am looking at T03001, just the base household type table, where I'm just seeing the total number of households where the householder is Shoshone-Bannock alone or in any combination within Power County, Idaho here. And so as I click through the results here again, although we're receiving back the 2 categories table here, it's going to hit me with that data not available message. Similarly, for the 3 categories of tenure table, I'm not receiving that back. I'm just receiving the base tenure table here. And so once again, if we refer back to our slide here, where we were looking at the Shoshone-Bannock tribes alone or in any combination in Power County, Idaho, the population as of the detailed DHCA was 122, which falls into this level here, which is why we're receiving just that household type and tenure table with the one line of data within it. Before we move on to our next example, I mentioned before we are selecting those 2020 and detailed DHCB filters first before anything. And I wanted to highlight another reason for why I'm doing that. So when in this example here, where I select the 2020 and detailed DHCB filters first on the site, and then I navigate over to the race and ethnicity filters for American Indian alone, I see here I'm only receiving back a filter that says Navajo Nation alone. However, if I were instead to navigate over to the race and ethnicity filters first without selecting the 2020 filter and the detailed DHCB filter, I can see I'm actually receiving this Navajo Nation alone filter and this Navajo alone filter. The reason for that is because the Navajo alone filter is actually for 2000 census data, and the Navajo Nation alone filter is for 2020 census data. So because I didn't select that 2020 filter, I'm receiving both 2020 and 2000 decennial census filters on here. So having those filters selected really cleans up a lot of extraneous things that might get you lost a little bit. So we don't want that happening. So just wanted to give that a helpful tip here. First, select those 2020 and detailed DHCB filters before going in to select your other filters. So let's take a look at our next example where we're going to now look at detailed DHCB tables for multiple geographies. So my example here is looking for the Nigerian alone or in any combination population for all counties in Maryland. So we're looking at all counties in Maryland rather than just one singular county here. So to do this, again, let's go back over to our site here. This time, you can clear out filters using the X's, but I'll just go ahead and start a fresh search by going back to the home page here and going into advanced search. Again, as we mentioned before, good idea to first select the 2020 years filter here, and then select under decennial census, the detailed DHCB filter. Next up, we can select our race and ethnicity filter. So under race and ethnicity, we will go into Black or African American, detailed Black or African American alone or in any combination. We will go into Sub-Saharan African alone or in any combination. And then from here, we should see the filter for Nigerian alone or in any combination. So we've got our first three filters selected. Now let's add in our geography. So we were looking for all counties in Maryland. So under county, we'll go down to Maryland. And then from here, you could select individual counties, or we have this option up top just to select all counties within Maryland. So once we do that, again, just confirming my filters here, you can always hover over these if you can't read the full name here, and it'll give you a little pop-up showing you that we are looking at the detailed DHCB here, Nigerian alone or in any combination. So everything looks good to me. I'm going to go ahead and hit that search button in the bottom right corner. And then this time we do receive back 6 tables. So we receive back all 4 household type tables and our 2 tenure tables. This time though, when we navigate through each of them, we will see data available for each table. And so as I'm looking through these, I'll go ahead and minimize my filters here just to give me a more full screen view of the data. So just clicking on these little arrows here or these chevrons under filters to minimize those. And here I can see, again, as I look through the 6 tables that show up here, there is going to be data available for each of them in this particular example. So we can see the household type table here. These are going to be likely some geographies that have a smaller Nigerian alone or in any combination population within them based on the detailed DHCA. However, I do want to remind everyone we are still looking at total number of households here within each one of these counties. And then as we navigate through to our 2 categories table, we can see the total number of households is getting a bit larger here into the household type table with 6 categories, and then into the household type table with 8 categories, where we're receiving, in this case, just 1 county back here with Prince George's County having a total number of households at 7,506, where we're able to see all 8 categories of data for this table here. And similarly, for the tenure table here, we're seeing a similar thing happen as we look through the tenure table, as well as the 3 categories of tenure table here, having some of our larger counties show up within the 3 category type table here. I also wanted to mention, as you look through this, a lot of times when you're navigating through the site, sometimes you have a lot of filters applied and there's a lot of things that you go through and you want to come back to that table. We don't have a save search feature on the site at this time, but I did want to mention each time I add in one of these filters, you'll notice that the URL actually updates here. So a helpful tip for everybody as they look through these, if you have a table that you're coming back to all the time when you add in all these filters, you can always just copy and paste the table and bookmark it for later and then come back to it later on. So that's a way to kind of save your search, is just using the URL, bookmark it and come back to it later. So that's going to be it for this example here. So let's take a look at our last example. And in this case, I want to select multiple population groups here. And the example here is I'm going to look at Venezuelan and all South American population groups in Doral City, Florida. And when we're looking at this, the data returned may look a bit different just because the regional groups have a different threshold for what tables are returned for them. So when I say regional groups, I have a couple examples here. Some examples include European, Middle Eastern and North African, Caribbean Hispanic, Sub-Saharan African, American Indian, Polynesian, or South American, like we're going to be looking at here in just a moment. And so when you're looking at this table here, although things may look quite similar to our detailed group table before, notice that the population thresholds based on the detailed DHCA are a bit higher here. So because of that, we may not return as detailed data for the different regional groups, depending on what geography we're looking at. So just want you to keep that in mind when we navigate over and start looking at our South American and Venezuelan data here for Doral, Florida. So let's get started with that now by going back over to the site, and let's go ahead and just start a fresh search here in this case. So once again, let's just go to the US Census Bureau logo in the top left corner. Let's go to advanced search here. Scroll on down and apply a filter for 2020. Let's apply a survey filter under decennial census for that detailed DHCB. Then under race and ethnicity, this time we will go into the Hispanic or Latino, detailed Hispanic or Latino, and then into South American here. So here we are going to select both our South American regional group and then our Venezuelan, which is a detailed group here. So we selected both South American and Venezuelan. We've got everything set except for our geography here. And this time we're looking for Doral, Florida, which is a city in Florida. And one thing I always point out for newer Census Bureau data users is that you don't see the word city anywhere on here on the top geographies. That's because cities are going to be found under the place geography here. So just remember that if you're looking for a city, most of the time you're going to navigate into place and then into Florida. And then we could scroll down, or we could just do a quick search for Doral, and we can see Doral City, Florida right here. So when I check that box, I've got my 5 filters selected here, and I can go ahead and click search in the bottom right corner. And this time, as we navigate through our tables here, we're getting those data not available messages for the first table here, as well as the household type table with 2 categories. It isn't until we get to the 6 category household type table where we can see, for the South American population, we can see the total number of households here. And so we're getting just 6 categories of data back here, or 6 rows of data, if you'd like to think of it that way. And I'd like to just notice here, okay, it looks like the South American total number of households is around 14,000. And then as I navigate into the household type table for 8 categories, the total number of households where the householder is Venezuelan is around 9,000, but we're still getting back that 8 categories of data here in this case. And similarly, as we navigate through the tenure tables, getting that data not available message here, but when we get to the 3 category table, we can see all the data appear within this 3 category type table. So that's going to be it for the examples we're going to go to, and we're going to navigate back to our slides in just a bit and talk about, again, the differences between regional and detailed groups. But my main takeaway with a lot of this is that when you're looking at detailed DHCB data, although you may receive back all 6 results here in this case, there's only going to be 1 household type table and 1 tenure table for each detailed or regional group you're looking at that's going to return data based on your geography. So when we're looking at this again, let's come back over to our chart here and look first at our regional group for the South American population in Doral City, Florida. So I looked at the detailed DHCA total population count for the South American population in Doral. I saw that it was 43,739, which falls into this threshold here at the sub-state level, which sub-state does include places that we are looking at, which is why we're just receiving back that 6 categories household type table and that 3 categories tenure table. And then once again, looking at our detailed group thresholds where the population changes a bit here, the Venezuelan population in Doral City, Florida, as of the detailed DHCA was 29,416, which exceeds that 19,971 limit, which is why here we are receiving back the 8 categories household type table and the 3 categories tenure table. So if you wanted some more information on regional and detailed groups, I've included the full iterations list, which has all of the regional and detailed groups listed out here. You'll see that regional groups are shown with either an asterisk here, where you can see here I've highlighted the South American regional group, and then below that, detailed groups are going to be shown without an asterisk or boldface. So then underneath that, we can see all of the different South American detailed groups, including that Venezuelan population that we are looking at here. So I encourage you all to take a look at this file later on following the completion of the webinar. So that's going to be all for our examples for our data.census.gov demonstration that we were looking at there. Now I wanted to highlight a couple resources for learning more about the detailed DHCB, as well as some resources for learning more about data.census.gov before we then get to some of our questions. So first, if you would like to learn more about the 2020 detailed DHCB, I highly encourage you all to take a look at this detailed DHCB press kit. There's going to be including some really helpful blog posts, as well as a pre-release webinar, some technical documentations, as well as those iteration lists that I talked about earlier. Highly recommend you check out that pre-release webinar recording, where that is going to get into a lot more of the technical aspects of the detailed DHCB. So today we were focusing mostly on just finding the data on the site. If you wanted some more background information, some more technical information about the detailed DHCB, highly encourage you to check out that pre-release webinar recording from this detailed DHCB press kit. If you would like, though, to learn more about accessing the detailed DHCB data on data.census.gov, I've included 2 links here with some new materials that we've just put out. We have some video tutorials, very short and sweet, around 10 minutes or so, that will walk you through finding data in different examples on data.census.gov specific to the detailed DHCB. Or if you would prefer some PDF tutorials, some walkthroughs here. We have some how-to materials on using data.census.gov, as well as some that are specific to the detailed DHCB that were just released recently. If you are interested in accessing our data through our API, I've included some links here to one, help you get started, some how-to materials on how you can use our API, as well as a link straight to our developers page that has everything you need to help get started over on the API. We also have some workshops available specific to the Census Data API. We'll include some links to those later on, as well as some ways you can get there through our resources page, but encourage you all to check out the materials here if you are interested in learning more about using the API. If you'd like to sign up for data.census.gov updates, you can do so at the link provided here. All you need to do is enter your email and check the box for whatever you are most interested in. If you check the data.census.gov update box, you'll get things such as our monthly newsletter, like you can see our most recent example here. And I also wanted to ask that you all share your feedback on data.census.gov. So many of the improvements that we make to data.census.gov are based on user feedback. So you can provide your comments, any feedback you have on the site at the link provided down at the bottom here at census.data@census.gov. That's also found next to that advanced search button that we were clicking on throughout our examples here. That feedback button will actually direct you over to our census.data@census.gov email. And it's not just for feedback. If you also have questions, if you need help with data or anything like that, or help finding data, please do send us an email at that census.data@census.gov email. We are more than happy to help you out here. And with that being said, I would like to throw it over to Faith to talk about our webinar evaluation and then get us started with the questions. So Faith, I will let you take it from here.
Thank you, Sam. In just a few moments, we will begin our question and answer session. Today, we will be taking your questions over WebEx audio. If you have questions related to today's content, we invite you to use the raised hand icon located next to your name in WebEx. When we call your name, please unmute yourself to ask a question. Before we move on to the Q&A, I'd like to invite you all to give us your thoughts on today's webinar through a post-webinar survey form. What that means is the evaluation survey will appear in the browser automatically when you exit the webinar. If you have any notes for us to help us improve these webinars, or if you have any ideas on other topics you'd like to see covered in the future, please take a moment to fill out the survey once we wrap up the webinar. If you have questions remaining after our session concludes, or if you prefer to email us your questions, please feel free to reach out to any of the email boxes listed here. And if you are a member of media, you can contact the Public Information Office at the email provided below. For general data.census.gov questions from the public or for training requests, please reach out to the Center for Enterprise Dissemination. And both emails are listed on this slide. With that, let's go ahead and see if anyone has any questions for us at this time. Anyone who would like to ask a question, please select the raised hand icon to queue up.
Faith, this is Jessica. While we're waiting for some of the questions to queue up, do you want me to ask a couple that we have in the chat that I think are worth talking about?
Sure, that'd be fine, Jessica.
Okay. All right, Sam, so one of the questions we got multiple times is why did the tables populate with the no data available?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Yeah, and I know it can be a little bit confusing seeing the data not available message pop up there. But the main takeaway I want you to think about is that although you're seeing some tables pop up with the data not available message, really the way that you can think about that when you're looking at the detailed DHCB is that the data is going to be in one of the other tables you're looking at. So it's a little bit tricky because the data is appearing based on the detailed DHCA population count, like I was showing from those previous slides. It's based on the detailed DHCA population count, whether or not it falls into those different thresholds. So when it falls into a different threshold there, for example, when we saw it exceeded 6,971 at the nation level, we're receiving back just those most detailed or most granular detailed DHCB tables. So at the nation level, we saw we were receiving back those 8 categories of data back for the household type and receiving back the 3 categories of tables back for the tenure type tables. So although we're receiving back those different tables appearing up there that say data not available, we still do have data available. It's just appearing in one of the different tables. So I hope that that makes sense on there. If not, I'm happy to kind of clarify some more if so.
And I'll just add, so my understanding is there's some underlying reasons too for how the data is structured and everything, the way that it's set up, and that also impacts it. Because it is a little surprising to see the data not available messages. So yes, as Sam said, it's always going to be found. It'll be found in another table if you do see it. Don't panic. But there is some underlying reasons for the way that it's laid out like that. Let's see. Do we have any, Faith, have any questions queued up?
We do.
Okay, let's
Lisa?
go ahead and we can move to them.
Okay, great. Lisa, can you please unmute Jesus?
Yeah, I have a couple of real quick questions. One, will the data be available in a geo database that I can download and map right away? Two, I tried to access the Mexican population and I only saw 2 or 3 data items. My question's in the chat, but I've used the American Community Survey again to access the Mexican population, and I found quite a lot of very useful information there. So why couldn't I get that level of detail here? And my last question is, do you have or will have any ways of using the SAS Esri tool that would connect data from census right into Esri? I know that's not a census question, but very interested in that as well. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much for those questions. I'll do my best to answer all 3. I might not be able to get to all 3. We might need to pass a couple of those off to some of our subject matter experts, perhaps from our geography division. But I know for your first question about finding the data and attaching it to geographic files, the way to do that is when you're looking at the data, you can download the data as a zip file. And then within that zip file, it's going to have GeoIDs associated with each geography you're looking at. And from what I know, you can use those GeoIDs to tie those over to our shape files and then use that to map it in different GIS software. So when you're looking to find those GeoIDs, just remember on the site, there's 3 different download options you'll see. There's a CSV, an Excel, and a zip file. If you're looking for the GeoIDs, just look for the zip file there. So I hope that helps with the first question. For your second question, as far as there not being as much data for example, the Mexican population, I think maybe we might need to take a closer look at what exact query you were looking at there. But for this specific release, the detailed DHCB, the most we're able to get back is those 8 categories of data there. So we would see the family type, and then the tenure tables, the 3 categories of tenure tables. If you're looking for more detailed data, more expansive data, you would probably have to switch over to using something like the American Community Survey, just because that has more questions within the survey. So it collects a wider variety of data compared to something like the 2020 census. You could also look at the 2020 census detailed DHCA, where you can get population counts for detailed racial and ethnic groups like the Mexican population. So maybe take a look at that one as well. But we might need to take a closer look exactly at what you were looking at there and see maybe why some data may have not been appearing on your end. If you want, you can go ahead and email that question over census.data@census.gov, and we can take a closer look at it and maybe help you find some more helpful tables as well. As far as the last question, I believe that was related to using SAS within some like Esri software and things like that. That one we would probably need to check with our geography team. So that one, I would say if you don't mind, you could also include that over to our census.data@census.gov email, and we could send that portion of the question over to our geography division. And I think they would be able to help you out better than I'd be able to, if that makes sense. I hope that I was able to answer all the 3 questions there. And Jessica, if you had anything to add or anything, feel free to jump in.
No, I think you did great, and I did send the email address out too.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Faith, did we have any other raised hands, or Jessica, did we have any other questions lined up?
I'm not seeing any other raised hands at this time, Sam.
Okay. I have a couple other questions. It looks like we have a minute. One good question we got is, what is the difference between the detailed DHC file A and the detailed DHC file B?
Yeah, so the detailed DHC. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Hey, yeah, great question. So the detailed DHCA provides population counts, so it's the count of people. For the detailed race and ethnicity in American Indian, Alaska Native tribes and villages. So it gives you stuff like the total population count, and it gives you the sex by age counts, compared to the detailed DHCB, which provides the household counts. So for the same, detailed and regional groups as the detailed DHCA. So you get the total household count. You can get household type data such as family or non-family households, and then tenure. That's whether the home is owned or rented. If you go, we did release a brief. The brief is called Disclosure Avoidance in the 2020 Census, How SafeTab H Works. I can drop it into the chat for those who are interested. And if you scroll basically to the bottom, the second to last page, page 8, it includes a longer list with a lot more of those technical details about, how the data was protected and how that impacts the data. So I'll throw that link in the chat. But the main difference is that detailed DHC is population counts, detailed DHCB is household counts.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking that one, Alexandra. Jessica, did we have any other questions? I don't believe there's any other raised hands.
We have one more, and this might be one for Alexandra as well. So if T03001 total is different from the total in T04001, which total for the occupied housing units or households is recommended to use?
Yeah, great. That's a great question. So like we previously mentioned, there's up to 4 household type tables and 2 tenure tables. All 6 tables have a total household count, but for a given geography and detailed group, you'd only get 1 household type table and 1 tenure table. And since they both include a total household count, and the total household count may be different between those 2 tables, just based on how we protected the data, you want to choose the table that has the fewest categories, and that's because to protect the data, we add noise, which is just small random addition and subtractions to the data. And then the more lines that you aggregate to get the total count, the more noisy the data becomes. So if you're looking at the household type table T03002, household type with 2 categories, compared to the table ID T04002 tenure with 3 categories, you'd want to get the total household count from household type with only 2 categories, because 2 lines is less than 3 lines from the tenure. And so the household type 2 categories will be more accurate. Now, if you were looking at household type 6 or 8 categories compared to the tenure 3 categories, then you would want to go with tenure 3 categories, because again, the 3 categories is fewer than the household type 6 or 8 categories. But one thing is that if you get the least granular table, which is just a household type universe or tenure universe table, that only provides the total household count. And because there's no aggregation, it's just the total household count, both tables are equally accurate. And again, they might be off by a little bit, and we would just recommend to use whichever table aligns with your interests more. So if you're more interested in tenure, then you can use the household or the total household count from the tenure table. And I should also mention that is fully explained in the brief. I did throw the brief into the chat. And so I know that's a little bit confusing, and I think the brief really does a great job of kind of outlining that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alexandra. Thank you for linking that as well. I know that was something you all covered as well in your pre-release webinar that I mentioned everyone check out from the press kit. So for anyone who has technical questions like that, again, highly recommend checking out that pre-release webinar as well. So,
and I have one other.
Go ahead,
do we
Jessica.
have time for one more question,
Yes,
or do you want
please.
to? Okay, this one I think will be pretty quick. Does it actually make a difference in the sequence that you select the filters? So, for example, starting with the year as the first or last filter, and so on.
So if you know specifically what you're selecting, it shouldn't make a difference if you know exactly what filter you want to select. But if you're a bit newer and you're not sure exactly what filter applies where, I think it does actually make a difference. Like in that example I selected earlier, if you were looking for the Navajo Nation alone population and you didn't select 2020 and sent detailed DHCB first, then you would have that option between Navajo Nation alone and Navajo alone, and it might be a little bit confusing on which one you're supposed to select. So each time you add filters into the site, it clears out extraneous filters that aren't relevant based on those filters that you're applying. So if you know exactly what to select, then it doesn't really make a difference because you know you're going to select the same ones either way. But I like to kind of clear stuff out as I go through my searches like we were doing. So that's why I was just recommending to select 2020 and the detailed DHCB first before going through anything else. You don't have to do it in that order, but it's just a recommendation. All right, and as we maybe wait to see if there's any final questions that are coming in, I'm going to go ahead and just talk through these last two slides that we have here. Just wanted to mention again a couple different ways you all can stay connected with us. First is through our resources page, which can also be found from that help button on the data.census.gov homepage. So we've got the help button that leads you to our resources page, our feedback button that receives you to our feedback email here. And then if you would like to receive any training requests specific to data.census.gov, you can reach out to our email here. And lastly, if you would like some general Census Bureau training requests outside of data.census.gov, we have a very talented team of census data dissemination specialists who specialize in all kinds of different tools that the Census Bureau has available. So there's a lot of different data tools available from the Census Bureau, and you can access those and get trainings on those from our data dissemination specialists. If you'd like to request a training, it's completely free. You just have to contact the data dissemination specialist team at census.askdata@census.gov or contact them at the phone number here. With that being said, I'll do one last check to see if there's any final questions. Faith, do we have any final raised hands before we close out here?
No more raised hands, Sam.
All right, with that being said, wanted to say thank you all so much for joining us here today. And I will go ahead and throw things over to Lisa to close us out. So Lisa, I'll let you close us out. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. This concludes today's webinar. Thank you for your participation. You may disconnect at this time.